Oh, my screen time is so bad. He just
My work in law hasn't been so much directly. Mostly on the treatment. Water situation
Den ideale nordlendingen. Jeg føler liksom ikke helt at jeg stemmer helt med den, for jeg er ikke sånn her hår på skuldrene og et fest.
Hva faen?
Det har vært veldig trendy å si ja, vi hører på dere, kjempefint med ungdom, men så har de liksom ikke gjort noe. Det er ungdom som legger premissene.
Om 5 år, jeg vet ikke, det viktigste er jo fremtiden utdanning. Det blir jævla
Hello. Hello, is my sound okay? Perfect. Thank you so much for coming to this True North 2026 Town Hall. My name is Ylva Schwenke. I'm a journalist with the National Defense Magazine, or Forsvarets Forum in Norwegian. So this session has 2 parts. In the first part, you will get to hear personal stories of young people telling about how they have experienced living and growing up in the Arctic and what the Arctic means to them. And in the second part, we will have a panel discussion about how we see the challenges in the Arctic and solutions for them. But first, we get to hear the stories of Parahini Parabaran, Vesa Orasalo, Charity Ropati, James Tlen, and Embla Abild. First up is Parahini. Give her a warm round of applause.
Hi, my name is Parhine Parabaran. I'm 21 years old, studying law here in the beautiful city, Tromsø. A fun fact about me is that I grew up in a rural municipality north of Tromsø called Karlsøy. But I haven't always lived there. My parents came to Norway as refugees because of war, and lived on the west coast until my father pursued his education as a nurse in Tromsø. He later worked in Karlsøy, where he immediately fell in love with a small community in Northern Norway. Not because it was big, not because it was easy, but because of the people. He was welcomed with open arms, supported at work, treated with respect, even though he clearly looked different from most others. In Karlsøy, he belonged. But he also saw something else, opportunities that many people often overlook in the North. Growing up, I was told directly and indirectly that success only existed in the South. And if you wanted to achieve something, you had to leave the North behind. But over the years, I realized that I was wrong. At just 13 years old, I joined the Municipal Youth Council. Soon after, I became a part of the Youth County Council in Troms and worked as a youth advocate across North Norway and the Arctic. Suddenly, I wasn't just observing my community, I was shaping it. I was sitting in the rooms where decisions were made. I was speaking for young people who rarely got heard. And that changed everything. Some people say youth engagement is nice, but it's not that important. But I couldn't disagree more. One of the biggest challenges which we meet in the Arctic today is that we are losing a lot of young people. They leave for education, for work, and for opportunities, and many never returns. But those young people are the future of the Arctic. Without them, communities shrink, innovation slows, and culture fades. Because yes, there are a lot of opportunities in the Arctic, but we need to build the already existing opportunities at the same time as we create new ones. And the ones who knows the best which opportunities that we need to build are the young people. We need to stop closing doors and rather open them and invite youth to discuss, debate, and lead. And I promise you, we won't disappoint you. If we want a strong future in the North, we need to invest in young voices now. That means creating spaces where youth are listened to, where our ideas matter, where we are included in shaping the Arctic we will one day inherit. Because young people are not just leaders of tomorrow, we are leaders today. I am the Arctic.
Have you ever thought about something you need to explain, but the words are not just coming to your head because it's too obvious to you? That's how I felt when I started approaching this topic. So what does the Arctic mean to me? First of all, it means home. I was born in Kirkenes, Norway, and I've lived my whole life in the Arctic. And I'm really deeply rooted in the Arctic land, especially in Näätämö area, where I'm from. But I do feel connected to the Arctic, also in the other parts of it. And that connection comes through the wilderness, the nature, and the connection with the people. For me, the Arctic means nature, comfort, peace, art, and connection. Wilderness, it provides me possibilities. Hunting and fishing, that are a big part of my lifestyle. And you know the saying that you give a man a fish, you will feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, he will go bankrupt. Buying expensive flying fishing equipment. But it creates possibilities. But the Arctic nature is rough and it's unforgiving. I said about the comfort, but for me the Arctic comfort comes through the hardship, with the nature testing you first. when I'm fishing and I can feel the cold air get inside my bones, or I'm by the fire and drying my clothes before I go to sleep, drinking pure water from the lake, that's when I feel alive, and that's when I feel the true, simple comfort. I said peace. Life in the north has always felt peaceful for me. But when I was like a teenager, maybe we were talking about if something goes wrong globally, maybe zombies are coming, just go home, you will be okay. And that proved to be true during the COVID times. But now I'm starting to question with the growing tensions if the same will continue. My world, it is small, big world. If I start walking from my home to my favorite hunting place, it would take 2-3 days. But in the global big world, in 2-3 days, I can reach Australia or US. And this tiny piece of Arctic, my bubble, it feels endless. And it takes a lifetime to get know to it completely. And in this small, big world, in my bubble, I have the most beautiful art. I was sometimes asked that, what do you have there? I said, art. You just need to go outside and picture the frames to the nature, and you will have the most beautiful art exhibition ever, chasing every hour, every day. For me, the Arctic means connection to the people. We have very similar lives, especially with indigenous people around circumpolar Arctic. And we share the same problems, we share the same possibilities. And I think the Arctic is like a rope that connects these small worlds together, our own bubbles together. The Arctic, it's local. The Arctic is global. It is deeply rooted into the people. The Arctic is a state of mind. It is a way of living. I am the Arctic. Thank you.
Waka, winga yuburo, yuktunaguvach, jaimunga, Kanganak, Alaska. Hello everyone, my name is Charity Ropati. I am Yupik in Samoan, my given name is Aguvach, and I come from the native village of Kanganak, Alaska, a tiny community right off the coast of Southwest Alaska. In 1967, families moved from Quigligunak to create Kanganak, my community. My great-grandfather and other men moved our homes by wrapping ropes around them and using a ski-doo, a snow machine, and dog sleds, brought the village 11 miles northwest, away from the rising water. Our families moved because they knew that the ground was sinking due to permafrost. They knew and they planned ahead. We did this without the help of the federal government, state organizations, or outside aid. And time again, Indigenous peoples, not only in Alaska, but across the Arctic and the world, have made impossible decisions and sacrifices, relying solely on themselves to ensure the survival of the next generation in the face of a changing climate. This is the story of how my village came to be, and in part how I came to be. For thousands of years, my people have lived from the land and ocean along the west coast of Alaska. We hunt walrus and seals from the Bering Sea, we catch salmon from the river, and gather berries and salmon berries from the tundra. The land has always provided, and whatever was caught or gathered was always shared. And the sharing created an immense bond. Our people were never poor because the land provided and we took care of her. And this bond brought us immense joy. This is how my people define wealth. We are taught to respect all living things. The land gives us animals and birds. The water gives us fish, seals, and whales. And in my culture, they are considered our relatives. There's a close relationship between the animal and human world. We believe humans and animals communicate through shlamyo, and these relationships are governed by rules. But what happens when these rules are violated? When the rules are broken, that food source either becomes scarce or disappears entirely. And this is what we're seeing across the Arctic and across the world. The act of assigning value to land and commodifying its resources directly contradicts everything we are taught. Our salmon are disappearing, our sea ice is melting, permafrost is thawing, and sea levels are rising. We are taught that sea ice ensures the return of our sea mammals. So tell me, what are we supposed to do when the ice is gone and our rivers no longer flow with salmon? Indigenous peoples make up less than 5% of the world's population, yet we protect 80% of its biodiversity. And despite this, entire ecosystems are dying because global leaders are unwilling to do what we all know what honestly needs to be done: a just and immediate transition away from the current system, fossil fuels. In 2020, I traveled over 3,000 miles from Alaska to attend Columbia's School of Engineering to better understand the permafrost my great-grandfather Inakuk understood so well. I watched my own mother, one of the first in our family, cross the stage to receive her bachelor's degree when I was 11, and when I graduated just this past year, I became one of the first in my family to hold an engineering degree and became one of the first Alaska Native women, the first Inuk to graduate with a civil engineering degree from Columbia in its over 270-year history. And in those 270 years, not a single federal, state, or local entity has taken responsibility for preventing our communities from further sinking into the ocean. I remember my grandmother teaching me and my siblings how to cut fish for the first time back home in Kong. My hands shook as I awkwardly held the ulu, cutting salmon to hang on a rack made of driftwood. When I finished, I lifted the fish toward her. She grinned and told me it looked like shark bait. Her gentle teasing filled me with joy, and I felt connected to her and everyone there, to my community, and to the land and water. The ability to hunt and subsist as our peoples have for thousands of years, to dance and to sing in Yuktun, our native language, these are the dreams of my generation. These are the dreams I want for our children. And when our children can truly dream, when they can live in a relationship with the land, that's when we know we're good. But I'm also here to remind you of another Indigenous practice and value, and that is of joy. When the land is healthy, people are healthy. And when the people are healthy, so is the land. We must meet this moment not only with urgency, but with a hope. We have to have the courage to invest in joy and in the joy of our communities. Even amidst the devastation back home in Alaska, my family and community still laugh. We tease each other, we grin at the next generation, and call their first cut of salmon shark bait. And we find wealth through this kinship. Practice this as well. But I also want to be clear that joy does not erase what we are currently living through. Just this past year, we have experienced storms of a scale and intensity our elders tell us that they have never seen before. In October of 2025, Typhoon Halong tore through our region. It devastated communities in Western Alaska, homes drifted into the ocean, and over 1,500 people were forced to evacuate, my relatives. Our people became climate refugees in lands that we have called home for thousands of years. When the ground beneath your home is no longer stable and the ice that once buffered your shoreline is gone, storms like this become catastrophic. What once would have been survivable is now life-threatening. And this is not a future scenario or something you talk about theoretically. This is our present. This is our reality as Indigenous peoples in the Arctic. Our people have always known how to adapt. We plan ahead, we have moved villages, we take care of one another, but adaptation without accountability is abandonment. We cannot continue to be expected to survive the consequences of a crisis we did not create. So when I ask you to act, I am also asking for responsibility and for solidarity. I'm asking for a just and immediate transition and for direct investment in safety, dignity, and self-determination of Indigenous communities. We are still here, we are still fighting, and we are still choosing joy despite it all. Guyana Juknak, thank you for having me. My given name is Aguvach, and I come from the incredible native village of Kongaganuk, and I am the Arctic.
Good day, everyone. My name is James. I'm a 31-year-old mechanical engineer. I've traveled all the way from Kewaunee Lake in the Yukon, Canada, to be here. When people imagine the Arctic, they often imagine quiet, white snow, open skies, and silence. But in many Canadian Arctic communities, silence isn't what you hear. What you hear is diesel generators. In my hometown, like many communities across Canada, the diesel power plant sits right in the middle of our town. The generators run all day and all night. The sound becomes a constant background noise. Along with the noise comes the smell, the exhaust, the knowledge that this is expensive, polluting, fragile, but it's also essential. Diesel isn't just power for us, it's heat and light, it's water, it's survival. And for a long time, that reality felt fixed. Diesel was just the way things are in the North. But being in the Arctic, you can't just blindly accept limits, you learn to adapt. My community started asking a question. What would it look like to reduce our diesel use? Not just for the environment, but for our quality of life. That question led us to a wind turbine project. It wasn't simple. Nothing in the Arctic ever is. The logistics, the weather, the cost, the skepticism was all hard. But we understood something important, that we already live closely with the wind. We know its strengths, we respect its unpredictability, it's part of our daily experience. From inception to completion, it took our community over 10 years to build our turbine. When it was finally installed, the impact was felt immediately. For the first time, our diesel generators turned off, and they stayed off for over 7 days. You could hear the wind instead of the machinery. The silence wasn't empty, it was powerful. The project didn't replace diesel, that wasn't the point. The point was having a choice in our future. It was proving that we are not passive, we're not stuck waiting to be saved. This is what resilience looks like in the Arctic. It's not about rejecting modern life, it's about shaping it to fit our place, our values, and our reality. We adapt because we have to. We read the land, we respect the weather, we understand the systems because our lives depend on them. Using wind alongside diesel isn't a contradiction, it's a continuation of how we've always lived our lives, working with nature, not pretending that we can overpower it. The Arctic is often spoken as a warning sign for the rest of the world. That's true, but it's also a place of solutions, innovations, and leadership, especially from the people who live there. When I think about what the Arctic means to me, I don't think about remoteness, I think about responsibility, about listening closely, about finding a balance that demands respect. The Arctic isn't just where I come from, it's how I think, it's how I adapt, it's how I imagine the future. I am the Arctic. Shonithan.
Hi, my name is Embla. I'm 18 years old, and I'm one of the few who have had the opportunity to call Svalbard and Longyearbyen my home my entire life. I practically grew up outdoors, hiking in the mountains, snowmobiling, hunting, playing, and dog sledding, as well as being a part of Longyearbyen's rich cultural life, through sports and music. For me, these are not just hobbies, it's my life. Longyearbyen is the northernmost permanent settlement in the world. Its history began with whaling, then coal mining, and today we're working towards becoming a society based on tourism, education, and families. Longyearbyen is home to approximately 2,500 citizens representing over 40 nationalities, a fact alone that probably challenges most people's idea of the Arctic and who the Arctic really is. Life on Svalbard is shaped by constant uncertainty and external threats, extreme weather, uncertainty in provisions, climate crises, and the presence of polar bears, a part of our everyday life. The Arctic is a harsh place. Its ruthless, yet remarkable nature is unforgiving, and it will humble you. Still, in the midst of all of that, you will find our warm little town, Longyearbyen. For those of you less familiar with my home, Svalbard is a part of the Norwegian kingdom that follows Norwegian law, although on top of that we have the Svalbard Treaty. That means that several laws and regulations differ from mainland Norway. For example, we do not have a municipal health law, as we are not a municipality, and so we have no form of mental health help locally available for us, which is something our youth council is working hard to change. Svalbard is also visa-free, meaning anyone can move there whenever they want as soon as they are financially stable and can support themselves health-wise. Until recently, all residents over the age of 18 had the right to vote in local elections on Svalbard. In 2023, the Norwegian state removed that right from a third of our citizens, our internationals, leaving them without political representation, and too many felt overlooked and silenced. Since then, Norway has continued to push out and undermine our international citizens, pushing for a Norwegian family society, and losing the right to vote has turned into a symbol of this Norwegianization of our people. For many, this has created a deep sense of exclusion from our society. I find it painful to hear foreign youth in our society, in our school, during discussions saying, "I'll just stay quiet. I don't even have the right to speak. I don't even have the right to say anything." So who is the Arctic? It's not built on Norwegian presence. It's not built on Norwegian passports or the nationality Norwegian. It's built on diversity, and each and every one who has chosen to call it home. It's built on trust, it's built on respect, and it's built on interdependence. Dependence on yourself and your fellow citizens, because in the end, that's all we have. What I love most about the Arctic and my home is not only the mountains, the glaciers, the polar night or midnight sun, the aurora borealis or the polar bears. It's the people. Our exceptionally diverse community is filled with warm and welcoming people. My so-called Svalbard family, our diverse and chosen family, far away from our biological one, who have formed me into the person I am today, a person I am proud to be and a person I would never have become anywhere else in the world. That is why it's so painful for me to see how our community is affected by policies made over 2,000 kilometers away in Oslo that oppress our international citizens. Longyearbyen has never been a fully Norwegian community, and I hope it never will be. The Arctic and Longyearbyen is Longyearbyen precisely because of our diverse community, filled with kind, warm hearts in such a harsh place. And that is why I love the Arctic. That is why I continue to fight for the Arctic and our unique settlements. And this is why I can stand here before you today and proudly say that I am the Arctic.
Thank you so much for the incredibly inspiring and very strong accounts of your experiences living in the North. Yes, a round of applause. That was great. That was amazing. I would like to introduce the panel, session 2. And I would like to start now. I'm introducing one and one, and I expect you to clap them in. So, first up is Emilia Taimi, who's a doctoral researcher at the University of Lapland, Finland. She has been a legal advisor at the Finnish Energy Authority, and now she researches how to reduce the environmental harm caused by batteries and making their use more sustainable in the future. Give her a round of applause. Next up is Johan Nikolaus Wollberg. He's a young Sami reindeer herder with roots from northern Norway and northern Sweden. He's the chair of the Sami youth organization Noere, as well as a part of the youth delegate program of the Sami Council. Welcome up. Then we got Agnete Masternes Hansen, who is the state secretary in the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development in the Government of Norway. Welcome. Second to last, Katrin Kuhn. Katrin Kuhn is the director of mission at Andøya Spaceport in northern Norway. She's an aerospace engineer and has been working for aircraft and maritime operators in the Arctic from 2019, and she's from Switzerland. Welcome. And last but not least, Brett Campeau. Brett Campeau works as a legal counsel for the government of Nunavut in Canada. He specializes in government efforts of creating socio-economic development in a way that respects the Arctic environment as well as indigenous rights. Welcome. So, as far as I've understood, there is a record number of participants to this year's Arctic Frontier, at least from the media, I've been told. And I don't think I'm the only one who wishes that the Arctic didn't have to be this interesting, you know? Right now, we are sitting in the heart of where we see rapidly developing climate change, huge geopolitical shifts in power dynamic, rising tensions, and a dire push for technological and industrial development on every front, from climate to defense. And in the middle of this, we find the people of the North, like the people we've seen telling their stories, Parahini, Vesa, Charity, James, and Embla, and like the people in the panel here and in this room. I would like to start asking you, Brett. This is sort of a huge, enormous field, sort of. But the Arctic is warming up at 3 to 4 times the global average. And the melting of sea ice, glaciers, and the Greenland ice sheet, extreme weather is getting more normal. And Charity, for instance, told us about how her family moved because they could understand the nature and the land changing. Have you, as a lawyer in Canada, worked with any cases like this? Do Indigenous people in Canada notice?
Okay, thank you, and thank you to our guests for sharing their stories in the first half of this session. Incredibly inspiring to hear from you all, and it's good to see everyone today. I do have to begin with the ordinary preface that I am here in my own personal capacity, so my views are not necessarily those of the government of Nunavut, but I'm a man of my experiences, and what I hope to share today is the perspective of one person, one Canadian, who has worked in the Arctic in various capacities throughout his life, and most recently it is in the public sector in law, working for a territorial government in Canada, Nunavut territory, our newest territory, and the homeland of many of the Inuit in our country. And it's incredibly important, the work we do, and I feel very privileged to be able to share what I can with you today. Before I actually began working for the public sector, I was a legal practitioner, a lawyer in the private sector in Canada for about 3 years. And I worked exclusively with Indigenous people in Canada. First Nations were our only clients. And really it is the First Nation people in Canada, I feel, that are the strongest defenders of the climate, of the land, of waters in our country. We have a robust regime protecting Indigenous rights in Canada, and those rights have been leveraged in ways that have helped to spur climate action, both mitigation and adaptation in our country. I can offer a few examples, some from personal experience, some not. There have been a lot of developments in this field. It's rapidly changing. But we are seeing that youth groups in particular, often Indigenous peoples themselves, have brought legal cases against governments in Canada, challenging government policy on climate change. And we're seeing progress there. It's really a cutting-edge area of the law. And we've really just gotten past the first hurdle, which was agreeing that these are justiciable issues, that these can actually be tried in court. And so now youth are appearing in court arguing that failures to take concrete climate action has really impeded their own rights. We have rights protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, rights to life, rights to equality. Those have been leveraged as a way to force governments to really ensure that climate action is taken that will protect the lives of youth and future generations. That's an important area of growth. It's not one I have much personal experience with. My experience in the private sector was primarily helping First Nations bring treaty rights litigation, arguing that failures to engage with Indigenous peoples in the process of evaluating what projects should proceed, like what mines, what forestry projects, what hydro projects should proceed. Often governments have done this without fulfilling the duty to consult in Canada. There is a legal obligation there as well under our Constitution for our government to engage with Indigenous rights holders, to consult with them, and if at all possible, to obtain consent before pursuing projects. And we know these projects can have huge development impacts and impacts on the climate. So Indigenous rights, and through the litigation that I helped to develop in my previous practice, we challenge governments in their processes for developing forestry in northern Canada, and we have had success there. But often we don't want to go all the way to court. That's usually a last resort, and it's incredibly expensive, to be frank, to hire lawyers, and that shouldn't be the solution. But what we found instead is that litigation and advocacy and protest, honestly, have been powerful tools to make sure that governments engage early with Indigenous groups to protect the environment. And when you're protecting Indigenous rights, you're really taking great steps to make sure that what we're all doing is sustainable. So I think that's the lessons I've drawn from my practice so far. It's the importance of working with Indigenous rights holders early to make sure that we respect their roles as land and water stewards. And really as the most important, you could argue, and I do tend to agree that they're the most important defender of the climate in Canada and around the world.
Thank you so much. We've had some cases of protests and Indigenous people, the Samis, protesting industrial projects and stuff. And Johan, does this ring a bell to you? What Brett is talking about, and as a reindeer herder?
It does ring a bell, and I also want to preface this that I am coming this both from personal experience as a reindeer herder, but also as the chair of NOR. So I have the voices of Sami youth of Norway backing me up as well. We do tend to agree that the way that we see how these projects play out, it's very much putting a price tag on our human rights. And I want to paraphrase a great speaker that spoke earlier today, that there's this concept in my head that for me is so obvious, and when I say it to the public as well, you're also probably going to be like, of course, and that's FPIC. And for those who don't know, it's free, prior, and informed consent. And more often than not, they're very good at asking for consent, but it's not really free or easy to give consent when someone is already in your backyard with the shovels and digging up the earth. Like, do we have your consent to start the project? And more often than not, these past couple of years after COVID, we've noticed that we are more or less being threatened by being thrown into jail or taken into custody being hit with fines, taken to court for standing up for our human rights. And luckily, now the conversation is also changing from we're not just stakeholders in these projects, but we're actually right holders. We have a right to our lands, we have a right to our culture. But the Norwegian government is very insistent on putting a price tag on our human rights. Whether this be, oh, but you don't really need this land. We can pay to feed your reindeers, as very specifically with Fosen, but also with similar projects internationally. For example, in Sweden, where they try to, I wouldn't say trick us, but try to give us some candies that we say yes.
It's harsh words. I'll let the government answer this.
Sorry.
No, I wouldn't say that I agree on the things that have been said right here, because for us, we also want the dialogue, we want the free speech and the opportunity to have discussions where both the government and the Sami population can discuss what's important for me, what's in it for me, and then we can find the solutions. But if you want to find the solutions, you can't have one part of the dialogue already deciding beforehand what the solution is. And that goes for both the government and the reindeer herders, as an example being brought up here. So I don't believe that FPIC is the same as one part having veto in big questions like industrial projects or those kind of things. And for us, it's a main goal to cut climate change and pollution, especially in the north, because those of us living here are those who's experiencing climate change more than anyone. So we see the consequences, we see them every day and from every year, and now it's the 6th year after each other where we don't have the same opportunity for reindeer herders to have land for feeding the reindeer because of the climate change. So that shows us that we have to have the same goal moving forward as to how can we make sure that we cut climate change, have a sustainable future, and also make sure that we have infrastructure, jobs, and opportunities for those of us choosing to live our lives in the north. And for us, it's really important, and I believe Ylva, we're coming back to that later, that even though it's a main priority for us to both make sure that we have the dialogue and consent and the equal respect for each other, having our differences, it's some industrial project, for example, that's crucial for the government to make sure that happens because of where we live, the international situation, and it's crucial that we have both places to work, to live, and that we have jobs, and that it's not only economic, I don't know what it's called, like gifts for those of us choosing to live here, but that you also have something to live for, and that you have a good job, and that you have a life outside of the job. So we might say that some project we need to have because it's critical infrastructure, and then we need to have the discussion on how are we moving forward to both cut climate changes, make sure that we have the infrastructure that's critical, and also maintain our goal and also our human obligations for the indigenous people living here, because a lot of us are both indigenous people and the government, so we have a common interest in finding common ground.
I think this is very interesting because it sort of puts the finger on the issue that I feel like you almost always meet when you're supposed to build out like industrial, like economic growth, blah blah, and then you have other like nature interests, like ecological interests going against each other. Is it possible to find sort of a common ground, Emilia? You're studying more sustainable batteries, for instance. The
Yes.
battery industry. I don't imagine that as like a very very environmental friendly industry, you know.
Yeah, I need to say I'm not studying battery industry as such. I'm a legal researcher and looking at the governance of batteries and the environmental impacts of batteries.
Even better.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I like it. And what I think about the common ground as like legal scholar, I believe that, of course I do believe that because that's what I do, but the law could act as a way to balance this, and that's actually what environmental law is created for, to balance these different interests. But then we come to the fact that whose interest is taken into account and how are they valued, and then we have different regulations and processes for that. But in a sense, I do think that's something we should aspire, and we have tools, and we are coming up with new tools also on the legal field, and thinking about the governance of the energy transition. For example, there's this, well, the term just transition is thrown around a lot, but there is looking at the, I'm also, my expertise in the EU regulation. So if I'm looking at the EU regulations that are fairly new and we have coming up, I see that there's this increased relevance of corporate accountability and corporate social responsibility, which there's new tools to make sure that companies are obliged to assess what risks, for example, their, I don't know, battery plant or recycling plant might have, or another renewable energy related project. But on the same time, we are living uncertain times, and also in the EU, I've noticed this sort of maybe a backlash against these new regulations, that now that there's geopolitical tensions and there is this also a political will to underline competitiveness and economy and security, and then these policy goals can come a little bit across each other, and then we need to sort of be clear what is the goal actually, and then so that I believe that if we agree on the goal, and if that is clear in mind, then it's easier to find a common way how to go there. That's maybe my piece on that.
What would you, if you could decide the goal, what would the goal be?
For the
battery industry and.
If I'm thinking, like, essentially, I think energy transition has emerged because we need to cut the use of fossil fuels, as we heard. It's the thing that humanity needs to do in order to cut the emissions and tackle the climate change, and also other pollution and biodiversity degradation, which are other crises we are having. And that, for me, that is the underlying goal, because then without the nature, it is possible not to have the people living there, and without the people, it's possible to not to have the society, and without the society, we don't have business or technology or industry or anything else. So I think that's the baseline for me.
Agnete, did you have anything to add?
Yes, because when we are discussing whose interest is at heart, or if it's possible to find a common ground, I believe that we don't have a choice not to do it, because I feel like a lot of the discussions that's been going around for the past few years have been us against them, or this versus that, in whose interest at heart in discussions regarding infrastructure or climate change, and what considerations you should take. And for my behalf, I used to have an example with the Second World War. My grandma and a lot of her generation, they needed to evacuate from their homes because of the Germans coming to Finnmark and burning everything they had. And when they had to flee to the mountains and hide from the soldiers, a lot of the people hiding in the mountains survived by the local reindeer herder taking down his entire animal bestand to make sure that everyone had food during the winter. And it's showing how we need each other all the time. We need the local knowledge about the mountains. We need knowledge about climate change and how it affects our surrounding areas. We need politics to make sure that we cut climate pollution, and we also need each other now more than ever. And before Christmas, I was also invited to a local farmer in my hometown who invited the government, the soldiers as a part of the defense, and he wanted to teach the soldiers how to use an animal if you're in a crisis. How do you survive in the nature when you have nothing going for you? So he had a lesson for everyone showing this is how you survive in the Arctic when the geopolitical instability is so crucial, and a lot of people can feel insecure and maybe a little bit scared about what's going on. And it shows us that we again need each other, both in saving the climate and also in critical infrastructure. And we need the dialogue, we need the common ground, and we need to both have respect for each other, and also, even though we have our indifferences, we need to make sure that we have our best interests at heart moving forward, because we are the Arctic and we want to live here, and we need each other to make sure that we can do that also in the future.
Johan, then Brett, and then I have a question for Katrin.
Thank you. Now, this is not directed at you specifically, or anyone for that matter, but I do want to ask the panel and everyone here and people who are listening in, how are we supposed to feed people if we have no viable land? When we have these land encroachments, erosions, storms. I would love to be able to be part of this, like feeding people, being able to help my community. But if I don't have land for my animals, I don't have a herd, or a big enough of a herd to share my surplus. Thank you.
Thank you. Brett?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for the discussion so far. It has been excellent. I did want to pick up on the conversation around critical infrastructure in particular, and how we would balance rights and interests to ensure that any development that does occur is done sustainably. When I hear critical infrastructure, I think of the analog in Canada, which you could argue is national interest projects. And there has been a push in Canada now to accelerate the development of such projects, given the geopolitical uncertainty that we're experiencing. There has been a push to move forward on projects of national interest. And that begs the question, whose interests and how do we define it? What criteria are we really evaluating these projects against? And that goes to the values question. And really in Canada, we tried to have a rigorous regime for project and impact assessment. In Nunavut territory, we're built on the foundation of co-management institutions, where all the different rights-holding groups, the Inuit organizations, the different governments with a stake in a project, all meet with representatives that are appointed by these different institutions in order to try to evaluate the pros and cons of these projects. From a conservation angle, Indigenous rights, of course, incredibly important in these conversations, and the economic perspective. Because in the Canadian Arctic especially, there is a need, of course there is, to pursue development opportunities to help lift people out of poverty, because there is that disparity between the North and South in Canada. So it has to be that we try to pursue both. That is always a challenge, isn't it? And when I hear critical infrastructure, I think the language is strategically important in the EU parlance for projects of this nature now, where there are critical infrastructure mines that have been labeled as such. What does that mean for the local resource users, the people that live there? How much of a say do they have in those conversations? Those are questions I've had in my experience here at the conference so far, because I know in Canada we are trying to make progress in this area, but we found it challenging, and we're growing too into this new world, trying to find solutions. And so I hope that maybe there are some reactions from the panel on that, and I think it does tie into our security conversations that we might have as well.
Any reactions? I saw you nodding, Emilio.
Yeah, I agree with your I was just thinking of Catherine's turn to speak, but I will be very quick. The EU Critical Raw Materials Act and the projects that have been labeled as critical, as you're probably also very familiar with. Yeah. And I'm coming from Finland. I'm particularly thinking about the Sakatti mine. And these are, I think, Critical Raw Materials Act, it hasn't been like there is no actually project done under the act. It's very new. So actually there is no precedent or knowledge how it actually will turn out when the law is enforced. But I'm following this from the academic side. It's sort of interesting, so to say, to see how it will be implemented and how the, for example, the fast tracking of environmental permit procedures and environmental impact assessment, how does it actually look like, and if there's something that is undermined on that process. Although saying that, I need to acknowledge that then we are again on this balancing act that we are using a lot of minerals, and then if we're importing them from countries where they might be even worse environmental regulations, then what is sort of the moral sustainability of that? But then it's a hard topic and hard question.
Thank you, Katrin. I think it's very cool that you work as an aerospace engineer. It sounds very cool. And on the space, when we're talking about critical infrastructure, it's as far as I've understood, it's a very important part of sort of the European space race. Could you tell us more about what you do exactly, and what is happening on Andøya?
Yes.
You can start with that.
I mean, maybe it's not as exciting as it sounds. Of course, there are a few days a year where there is a launch day. That are the most exciting days. But also the days in between are exciting, because everything we're doing for the first time. In Norway, but also actually in Europe, on the European mainland. And also the customers we're working together, those often startup companies, very young people, fresh from university that found the company, they build a rocket, and then as soon as they're done, they realize, oh, but we also need a place to launch the rocket from somewhere. And then we start to work with them. So it has a lot to do with collaboration, with bringing together young teams and make things happen. Yes, and of course, Andøya Spaceport is part of the critical infrastructure in Norway now. When we started to build in 2019, we got this commitment from the Norwegian government, this 365 million kroner. So I think there was already an understanding then how important it might be. But still, the whole defense aspect just came up, I would say, in the last 3 years. And also for us, working there, understanding what that could mean for us being part of this project in the future.
How is the project treated on Andøya by the locals or by the people living there?
The local community is really incredible. But I also think that this is linked to the military base that has been there for more than 50 years, with this squadron that was aircraft observing submarines in the ocean. So people are generally very open. They're open to aircraft noise. They're open to the industry, and I think they have an over average understanding on how important those capabilities are for Norway. So I think it's generally very positive, and we also appreciate that very much, but we also know that this is a openness that is not for granted and is not there forever. So I think it's a constant investment we also have to do from our side to keep that relationship going. It's not something we cannot just like sit and wait and assume that they will be fine with our operations forever. So.
How was it for you as a Swiss person to come to Andøya and start living there?
I think I had no idea about the Arctic. So I think the main reason why I moved up was actually not the job; it was the landscape. But I have in the last days been part of this amazing Emerging Leaders program, and I had some time to reflect and realized that, yes, I moved up because of the landscape, but I actually stayed because of the people. So I think that's why I'm still here. And then, of course, Andøya is a, you could say, a remote place. And I think that's also something I learned in the last days, how important it is to not only focus on that security critical infrastructure, but also having a resilient community behind that infrastructure. Because all of us that also move up from the middle of Europe, yes, we're moving up because space is exciting and so on. But in the end, we'll only stay if the community that we find there, the infrastructure we find there is also attractive for our private lives.
It's good that you bring up the defense and security aspect of it. As we probably have learned throughout the conference, the superpowers are more interested in the Arctic now more than ever before. I don't know. Maybe Brett, you can have any thoughts about higher military presence and how impacts of indigenous peoples in the north?
Yes, challenging times we're living through. I think we all feel a little bit of that anxiety. I feel it. Maybe that's because I'm Canadian. I think we're quite exposed in all this, along with our Arctic neighbors. So we do have to try to adapt to the new geopolitical situation that we're in. And I think it's still useful for the Arctic nations, the people in the Arctic, to look to our history in the region because it has been such an outstanding example of international cooperation and stability in trying times. And we've been rattled, I think, in the last few weeks, but through events such as this, I think it's still quite clear that we all have a lot in common and we can work together and must continue to work together. So I feel, yes, there's a need for us to reprioritize our commitment to the North. All of our southern capitals, Ottawa in Canada, we are looking more to the North than ever before. And that is partly because of these new international pressures, but it's also the case that it's a region that has been long neglected by southern capitals. So it's long overdue in a way, this attention.
When you say prioritize, do you mean like infrastructurally or militarily or in what way?
Thank you for the question. I think it has to be both. And we heard in the last big picture session that there is a need to make sure that any of these large infrastructure projects are dual use, that they meet the needs of any military applications, yes, if that's the primary purpose, but that they also meet the needs of the local communities, of society generally. And certainly in the Canadian Arctic, there is a lack of physical infrastructure. So we could benefit from that money. That might well go towards military purposes, yes, but if we're talking about deep sea ports, for instance, there's only one in the territory of Nunavut right now, in the capital of Iqaluit. And certainly more port infrastructure would help communities because we rely on freight during the short summer ice-free months to bring essential supplies to our communities. So port infrastructure definitely makes that easier. We don't have any roads connecting communities. There's talk of developing a road to the coast to help with our military preparedness, yes, but it would have other economic benefits associated with projects of that nature. So that has been the discourse in Canada around things like national interest projects, which I mentioned. They have a security purpose, yes, sovereignty, absolutely. But primarily, I think, and this has been the voice of territorial governments like the government of Nunavut and Inuit organizations, those investments have to meet the needs of the communities first.
Does this sound familiar to you, Agnete?
Absolutely, and last year the government actually launched our new High North strategy, discussing High North in a new era because a lot of things are changing and it's more important now than ever that we are the ones to define how to build communities in High North and how to make sure that you have the military defense but also local communities that where people can live and have jobs and have good lives and that we don't talk only about military defense, but also that people wants to have the good lives living in the Arctic. And after our launch of this strategy, we can see now that the EU is also discussing their Arctic strategy. So that's really interesting for us to also follow how we can define the politics for the High North in a new era. And an important thing for me is that if we are the ones to decide, like we are the Arctic, it's the session, and I believe that we are the ones living here, and we should decide where we should build, if we should build, and how we should build. And if we are to do that and have the say in how our resources in the nature, or how our roads are being built or whatever, we should also be the ones living here. And if we don't have policies to make sure that we both have jobs and opportunities for people like from Switzerland or elsewhere to come here, we can't expect more people to look to north and stay here because we need it, because this is where the opportunities lay. So we are really, it's really important for us to make sure that this is a policy to all aspects of the community and not just the military defense, because we need the whole package to make sure that people actually stay here and that we have the sustainability for people living in the north also in the future.
Yeah, I would like to briefly comment. I'm very happy to hear both of these. Sort of what I picked up from that was like these dual objectives, and in addition to sort of security as a, in a military sense, there's other aspects to security, and what I've been sort of participating in the conference for now 2 days and hearing a lot of talk about security, and been thinking also. I was happy to be part of the Emerging Leaders program. We were reflecting this there as well, like what is security actually? How do you define security, and what there is when there is security? Is it lack of insecurity, stability, vibrant communities? Like it's not only one or other thing, and it can be very subjective in a way. It's also a feeling. So I'm happy to hear these contributions.
Yeah, I just have another example on the dual use, because we heard a lot in the last days that those fundings that are taken from research and they're allocated to more like military applications. But I think when we think about satellites, we can actually do both, which is like one infrastructure on the ground. Because if we want to launch more satellites into polar orbits to monitor the Arctic and to understand climate change, with the same infrastructure, we can also cover the dual use application. So it's not a conflict per se, because the satellite we're launching doesn't know if it's a military or let's say more for climate applications. It's the same infrastructure and tools we need.
And there aren't any differences in the security of the satellite, or
Yes.
like this programming or something?
Yes, but I would say the core is the same. So,
Agnete?
Yes, I totally agree, and I would say also there's a misunderstanding that some people during this conference have said that you should either spend money on military defense or in science and those kind of things, because during our time in government we show the North that we can do both things at the same time, because in our biggest investments in military defense ever, we can also spend 1 billion Norwegian kroners on Polhavet 2050, a science project here in Tromsø, making sure that we also have the best knowledge about the Arctic moving forward. And we do that. We're building up the military defense, but we are also saying that people should have vibrant communities while living here. So we are also now starting a new funding for what's it called, like those people doing like soccer, swimming, handball, whatever, that they can have funding for actually participating in bigger tournaments, because youth living in the north should also experience those big things, even though you have long distance from A to B, or even if it's more expensive traveling around in north. We want to make sure that kids growing up here can have good, vibrant lives at the same time as we are building the military defense. We have to do both things at the same time, and I believe that we are showing that we can do that, but we need more of that moving forward to make sure that everyone keeps staying here. And I believe for a lot of us living in the north, it's more serious now, because from where I live in Finnmark, it's as far from Tromsø to my hometown as it is from my hometown to the Olenia base in Russia, that is very strategically placed for the Ukrainian war. So we have another seriousness into our work with politics and the contributions to sustainable lives in the north moving forward, I believe.
Brett, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, thank you. I would maybe pick up on something that Amelia, you mentioned. I 100% agree security is multifaceted. So there are many components: food security, energy security. We could go on and on. It's really about building resilience in the north. And I think there's at least one example I could share from Canada's Arctic, Nunavut territory, again, on the national interest project idea. So the first project to be so designated in Canada's north was actually a hydroelectric project outside of Iqaluit, Nunavut's capital. And so that directly has energy security implications. It would help get Iqaluit off of diesel power generation, which we rely on, all communities in Nunavut rely on diesel with experiments in small-scale renewables. But this investment from the Government of Canada and other partners has Inuit support. This would do a great deal to building that local resilience and energy security that we do need in the north. And I think it also is demonstrative of the importance of collaborating early with Indigenous rights holders. There can be no project in the national interest unless it respects Indigenous rights. And in this case, we know that this project has Inuit support. There are Indigenous engagement opportunities associated with it. It's not yet across the finish line, but it is being pursued as something that would be good for the territory and good for the country. And I think we need more examples of that. And it's really, it represents this need to take a really wide angle view of the issue of security and really look at all kinds of solutions for the north.
Thank you. On that, because security is, as you guys say, many different things, and for us, or me as a journalist, now I'm bringing my journalism in here. I'm sorry, but I have written a series of articles about small kommune counties in the northern Norway that are defense counties, and one of the main issues is not necessarily that the military isn't getting enough funding, but it's people don't want to move there or don't want to stay there, for instance. Johan, do you have any thoughts on how to make this sort of trend turn? Because Norway isn't the only country where people are getting more centralized. This is happening all over the world. So it's a huge question to ask you, I'm sorry. But if you have any smart thoughts, please share them with us.
Give me a second.
No problem.
No, but it's definitely something that the centralization. I did my military service in Norway because we have part of NATO, we have conscription, and I was in the Navy, and it was really good because I was stationed in Bodø, central big city, but then I had friends who were stationed in Sætermoen, which is further, it's just south of us, and to them it was more or less a punishment. It's the north, it's cold. Some people apply to Porsangermoen, which is close to the Russian border, and they think it's all amazing, cool. They get to go on skis, drive a snow machine, maybe even a tank. And then they realize it's mostly marching in the snow with the NATO planks, the ski that are handed out. And I honestly don't know what a good solution to that would be, because I'm born here, I love it here, I have my roots here, I have my best friends here, I also have other friends from different parts of the world, but this is my home. And even though Tromsø is also in the Arctic, this isn't really my home either, because my home is where my heart is. And right now, they're in the armpit of Norway, Lofoten, Narvik. And I would love to move back after I'm done with my studies. So I'm sorry I can't contribute there. I'm woefully ignorant on why people would want to move away to a more centralized
Yeah,
place.
it is absolutely crazy. I agree.
People always talk about the landscape, the auroras. So why leave?
Who knows? I personally think Southern is nice, actually. So, good. We have 13 minutes left. Does anyone have anything else to add before we talk about the future? Yes, Agnete and Katrin.
Yes, I could just add to the last question you brought up, because a lot of the focus that we are putting in the High North area policy now is how to build communities in collaboration with building the military defense and making sure that we don't have military ghettos moving forward, but making sure that this is integrated in the local communities, that we are building houses in the center and not next to the bases, and making sure that we, moving forward, can collaborate more on building, example, swimming pools or whatever, because the soldiers need it for training and the local community can use it for Saturdays in the pool. And that is an example of a way to make sure that people can have their day job is to protect the country, and after 4 o'clock that you can be a part of the community. And I think if you have vibrant communities and people have a place to belong, you also stay there for longer and choose to live there. But you need the jobs, you need something that happens after work, and you need to get to know each other, and we need each other more than ever. So I believe it's crucial that we are successful with this.
Thank you, Katrin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thought. So our minister for industry and trade said last year that Andøya Spaceport should become one of the most attractive launch sites in the world to launch satellites. And I agree with her on that. That's what our team is working on every day. But we should not forget that also those satellites are launched by people. And I think it's also a little bit an awareness topic for the government to understand that something has to be done to keep people in the north so that they can execute their jobs, and that we get a certain stability for that security relevant infrastructure.
Do you have issues hiring enough people now, or is it?
Yes,
yeah.
Still. Although, of course, again, space is exciting, but it's maybe not what makes you stand up every morning. Maybe it's more about the friends you can find there, the infrastructure you can find, if the street light is on when it's dark outside, and if you have a good power network.
Brett?
Thank you. On the question of how to keep people in the north, I think you could almost flip the question away, because we know that the north is growing in Canada. It's becoming a more and more important region. All the territories are experiencing quite rapid population growth. People are drawn in because of opportunity, and there are more and more young people living in the territories. But there is a shortage of good jobs and good education opportunities in our north. There's a lack of essential services in many communities. So I think really the question in the Canadian Arctic, and perhaps this is relevant elsewhere, is how do we make sure that this growing population is well-serviced, and has fulfilling opportunities available to them locally. So that, I think, comes down to education in a way where we need to be providing good education opportunities, high-level education, university level if at all possible, in as many communities as possible. And there is an initiative in our north to have an Inuit university. That would be very exciting for Inuit across our country. And it would help a lot because we know that a lot of young people feel that they have to leave their communities to get that education and get that good job. And it may become difficult to return. Many want to, I know, but it is challenging, and I think it would go a long way if more opportunity was there for young people in the north. And I think part of the solution is really putting to the forefront the cultural value and the importance of Indigenous rights holders exercising their rights and acting as stewards on the lands and waters. A growth area in our economy is tourism, but also conservation. You could speak of a conservation economy where Indigenous guardians are out on the land doing environmental monitoring work, making sure that wildlife are healthy, that there are healthy wildlife populations that can continue to meet the needs of Indigenous harvesters and other hunters, gatherers, fishers in the territories. And so I think there's room there. It doesn't have to be that we approve every mine. It could be that there are other opportunities that we explore through tourism and natural resources, yes, but also through the protection of natural spaces.
Thank you.
Can I add a very quick
Of course.
personal comment? As I'm in Finnish, we say that I'm a sluggish one from the south, which means that I've moved from the south to the north quite recently, actually like 1.5 years ago. So I'm sort of I'm trying to advocate for my friends and family to come and visit me. It's extremely nice. Can be extremely awful with the weather and everything, but it's extremely nice. So yeah, I believe there's hope, as Katrin also told that she stayed for the people, and I feel like in the north people really I have the feeling of people leaning onto each other when circumstances get hard. There's a sense of community.
Great, thank you. I have a last question to all of you, so we can start with Brett and take it this way. And it's a big question as well. So we have 7 minutes left, so we have some time. But where should we start moving things in the positive direction for the Arctic?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think I've tried to explore this question a few different ways personally. I know youth have to have an important role in what comes next. That's obvious. All of us in this room, we've made contributions to the future of the Arctic already. And it's up to everybody to get involved, I think is the short answer to the question. We can influence decisions. We can inform decision-making, and we can become decision-makers ourselves. And some of us may already be in that position. There are processes available to everyone. We have institutions that exist that try to create the space for interested persons to share their views. And I think it's incumbent on everybody to try to engage in whatever processes that are available to them. For instance, across the north in Canada, we do have a co-management model where there are opportunities to engage on projects of interest in the territories. So it is, I think it's encouraged that we all say what we have to say and stand up for what we believe in, and there are public forums to do that. And I think we just have to go and be noisy and get out there and maybe go to a protest if that's the way to go, right? It's whatever has to happen happens, and I think we all have different tools available to us.
Thank you. Katrin?
I think I cannot give like a super broad answer, but maybe more a personal one, as I'm also representing those people that are like moving towards the north. And for me, the key is really knowledge and understanding. And it sounds like a buzzword, I know, but I really understood so little about indigenous people and about the regulations in Norway and how things are decided and discussed. And I think investing time in understanding those aspects, even if you're from a very technical industry or from another industry that doesn't seem to belong to those topics, is for me a baseline. And of course, it's a very, very first step. So it's not solving anything, but shouldn't be forgotten.
Do you think on a personal level or sort of for us to actively share information?
Both sides. So I think it's about being curious when you move northwards, not assuming that you understand everything just because you understand the middle of Europe, but also for all of you that have been here longer than me, to share.
Great. Agnete?
I would say look to Tromsø and the European Youth Capital, because I believe that if young people participate in the politics and deciding what both the future and the present should look like, you would more likely stay in this region. So if those of us who are politicians spend more time listening to the youth and making sure that they are also in the decision-making processes, I believe more youth people would choose to stay here to begin with. And I also think it's important to say that the future of the Arctic belongs to the people of the Arctic. So we need to have that in mind all the time. And if that should be the saying also moving forward, we need to discuss also that I don't think we will be attacked where we are strongest with the military defense, but maybe more so where we are on our weakest, and that's in trusting each other. So if we stop talking to each other, stop trusting each other, and stop believing that we want what's best for each other, it's easier for countries that don't want the best for us to attack us where we are at the weakest. And to finish up, I think it's important that we don't discuss High North policies as a pity party. It's not a shame to stay here, and it's not because we need it or because you should be paid to stay here, but because it's a place filled with opportunities and you have the best job opportunities staying here, and you have cheaper housing or whatever. So you have...
I'll have to stop you, and we have to move on because we have 2 minutes left.
Yeah, but we just need to remind that it's not a pity party. We have big possibilities, and we need to discuss that more.
Thank you. You want?
I have a dream.
Oh.
And in that dream, I've seen the golden, or rather the silver path, because I'm Sami. And in that path, we need to take ownership. In reindeer herding, I might only have 20 animals in 1,000 animal flock or herd, but it's still my herd. I don't own everything, all of it, but it's still my herd. And even when we have sluggish southerners coming up here, it's also your herd. We need to take ownership.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's extremely kind, even moving. As a lawyer, we like to stick with the law, but law doesn't exist in a vacuum, and nothing exists in a vacuum. And I think where we can start, we can critically look at the narratives, how we understand what we're doing and how we do research, and what are we not looking, and what are in the gaps, what is not heard, and what is not seen, and what is the knowledge we use. And then the other thing I wanted to say is to meet each other where we are. There's a lot of people who are doing their absolute best to make Arctic a better place, and build bridges and greet a familiar, friendly face. And yeah, I think we go forward together. So that's what I wanted to say.
Great.
Also, thank you. I didn't thank the speakers
Yes.
that were before us. Exceptional speeches. Yeah.
Absolutely. And with that, 8 seconds left. I thank you so much for coming and listening to us. I hope you have learned something new or gotten inspired. And thank you so much to the panel. I think the conversation has been great, even though broad subjects. But I think we managed to do well. Thank you so much.